Welcome to Hot Topics. Hi, Andy.
Hey, Phil, you okay?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to the conversation that we said on the last podcast, actually, we're going to pick up. We were chatting so much that we realised we were overrunning the dog walking, washing up time. So we thought we'd re-script and pick up difficult conversations in this session. So yeah, looking forward to a conversation about that with you.
Yeah, and I think it's something which actually probably does justify putting its own time in, doesn't it? And so it doesn't get lost in other things we say. Because I think, again, I'll talk from a personal level. I think, the majority of people listening to this are therapists. They've not gone through the kind of the leadership roles that you probably did during your career. And so you've got a lot of people, boys and girls, men and women, who have gone through, they've done well, they've developed their businesses, and they start to, and different stages of their leadership. And I think it's always challenging, isn't it? And even as a therapist, when we do something with our own clients and our customers, things don't go well. There's
Absolutely.
It's hard to have a conversation, even if for some people, even complaining in a restaurant, having an uncomfortable conversation is, if they don't like the food, it's still, oof. I'll just avoid conflict rather than.
Yeah, very much.
But is it fair to say that sometimes if we do that avoiding all of the time in our businesses, that it creates a greater problem, doesn't it?
I think so, and I think you make the really important part at the start that what we're going to talk about is a framework, a reflection for life. So it's going to help you outside of your business role in life too. And you're right that I've many conversations or many situations I've been in, probably more so outside of work than in work, funnily enough, where I've thought something wasn't right. Perhaps somebody crossed a boundary or stood on my values, and I bit my tongue. And I decided not to take on that courageous conversation to put things right, to let people know how I was feeling or how they made me feeling. And that's quite interesting as well, because we can go off on a whole tangent on who causes who to have feelings, which I won't go down the road of today, but I know you and I often have conversations about that. Let's just say at this juncture that the behavior that you espouse based upon the comment of somebody else is down to your internal process rather than the fault of the individual that may have sparked you. And we won't go off any further down that cul-de-sac for the time being. But I think what's interesting is, and the important thing in a work setting to get right is sweating the small stuff, if you like, because it is the small things that people do. If I take it into domestic setting, there's that setting about who doesn't put the top on the toothpaste, or who leaves the toilet seat up, or whatever, the classic things in domestic settings, who never unloads the dishwasher. And they're the little things, the little niggles that people notice but don't talk about. And then those little small things become cemented, become bigger, and they cause us on the quiet more disquiet and more discomfort. And I think when we take that into the workplace, aside from the toothpaste setting, those little things that people do at work, maybe you do at work, that you're not aware of, that may tread on other people's values or behaviors, that neither of us is aware of, and that then causes some friction. Now, to keep it simple for now, let's imagine that friction that's caused is not by you, it's between two of your colleagues in work, or perhaps it's between a client or a customer and a colleague at work. And what's your role and relationship in that? And I suppose, what is conflict? So without, again, going too far down the academic route, my construct would be, it's a conversation between two or more people where the stakes are high, opinions vary, and emotions run strong. And we'll all be able to experience those kind of reflections in our own kind of life experience. And the challenge then becomes, what do we do about that? And sometimes we get into arguments. And of course, from a leadership point of view, getting into an argument with a member of staff or with a customer is really the last thing you want to be doing, because you've already then dropped down into a sparring situation. So I know you do a bit of sparring. You kind of, that means you put yourself.
We're not allowed to do that in clinic, though, right?
No. But if I use the metaphor as fine. So you've kind of walked in. You've walked into the arena.
Yeah.
And now you're part of the problem, because you're looking to duck and dive and get the poke back in again. And actually, that's not really going to be the effective way to resolve the problem, because you've joined the fight. Neither really do you want to be the referee in the context of a ring. So what typically is going to happen and what typically is going to go wrong? Well, often we think they're the problem. And they often think that we're the problem, which can be the cause of a conflict. We each make sense of a story in our own belief in terms of what we think happened. And of course, we know that, we're not very good at actually remembering what actually happened in that moment. It's like, a moment in time where you see somebody have an accident, or somebody falls, or somebody tries to recap, or maybe you're watching a movie or something like that, and you're trying to remember exactly what happened in what sequence. We never actually get it right that often. But of course, once we take that stake in the ground and we disclose that as our belief, then we're back in that sparring ring again, because we believe it's the red corner and you believe it's the blue corner, and now we're going to be in a squabble. And it's the argument that actually blocks us from exploring what's actually happening for each other. So we want to try and create an environment where, in a sense, nobody's at fault. What we're trying to understand is to understand the truth from a perspective of each individual, and to allow time to interpret that. Now, for some people, they might be at this moment going, oh, this all sounds pink and fluffy and a bit woolly. Surely I'm the boss. If I don't like it, I can get in there and wag my finger, shout a bit, and it'll all be sorted out. Well, yeah, a lot of people do that. And maybe it does sort it out. But actually what it tends to do is drive the behavior of the other people underground. So they might start talking behind their backs, water cooler conversations when, in clinic, when they've got a quiet moment. And suddenly what became a really small thing then starts to grow a bit almost like corrosive within the organization. So needing to know one another and the perspective is really important. Yes, as the leader, or as a leader or as a manager of people, you will need to make a judgment and to decide in policy and process terms whether what was happening was right or wrong, and make a decision. Is that making sense to you so far, Andy?
Yeah, it makes a real lot of sense, Phil. And I think, for me, I think it's important for people to hear this, because often, we've both been exposed to this through our careers and our postgraduate learning, or the things that we both choose to do. So I think it's important, because I think for many people have not been exposed to the things that we've chosen to expose ourselves to over the many years, is that it's recognizing that, it's allowing yourself, especially as a boss, as a leader, to step back and look at things in a different way. But like you said, I think a really nice point is not driving yourself in to be the boss. And sometimes, I guess in all times there are where that is acceptable, has to be done. People need to remove from an organization if the things have spiraled to that level. I think that's important. So we're not dismissing that, but at the same time, it's probably not the certainly not the only way to go about things. So I think how you've described it is really important, but also recognizing that, you know, your job is not to be the referee. I think it's a really nice kind of analogy to put it in as well. It's not, you know, to let them get on and watch them scrap and go, right, that's the winner, they're not, they won the argument. And again, it's, you know, is it fair to say that it's almost like the mediator? So the idea is for, you know, to ask good questions, to seek to understand, to allow further information to come out with the intent that actually, I think we are blinded sometimes by allowing ourselves to see other people's viewpoints, can't we, by our own?
Absolutely. And I think
that's a fair analogy.
And you know, from my point of view, you know, I'm a constant work in progress. I don't pretend to get it right all of the time. My own self-interest and my own implicit rules, unspoken rules, my past experiences will all bring a bias.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
To the moment, to the situation, to the person I might be working with, to the client I might be working with. I bring all that precondition with me, and then I'll openly find that, you know, sometimes somebody's only got to say one word, and the one word creates a chain reaction in me that spots everything that's ever happened. And I go, yeah, I told you so. I knew I was right. And then you want to go straight in there and tear a strip off somebody. Well, maybe, but maybe not. You know, step back, take a view, kind of understand what's happening. You and I have talked quite recently about, you know, clinicians who are really good at doing what they do, and they might get great patient outcomes, but actually, if you're not very good at filling in the system and putting your clinical notes together, then actually organizationally that causes a problem, because it probably means you can't charge the client, you're not compliant with HCPC regulations, etc., etc. So I mean, you kind of go, oh yeah, but they're a really good clinician. But you think, yeah, but Andy's very diligent. He's a good clinician, but he also fills all his, you know, documentation in. And people know that, you know, Fred that we're talking about doesn't do it. But why doesn't Phil say, you know, Phil, the business owner, say anything, you know? And then Andy starts to think, well, this isn't fair, is it? I follow the process, he gets away with it. Then all of a sudden you get this, well, Fred's blue-eyed boy, or, you know, da, 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 da. And all of a sudden you've got then a major issue to sort out, when if you'd nipped it in the bud in the first place and said, look, these are the rules, this is the regulation, this is the practice, this is the expectation. What is it that you don't understand? How can I help you to get a better understanding? Then you're on a different footing.
I think there's a step, you know, even before that, and I know it's something we're going to be talking around in our next podcast around business foundations, is around, you said quite, you know, they have to follow the rules and expectations. Well, I would even question everyone listening. I'd love to know, do you have them in place? Is there an expectation that when somebody joins your workplace or joins your team, that these are the expectations of how things work here? Are there a set of rules? You know, are there actually, you know, there's one set that you highlighted there, one set by the HCPC. And I'm sure many of you that worked from the NHS backgrounds, very explicit and complicit, and you will follow them because it's, well, then moving into private sector, or if you're from sports therapy, sports reha background, where actually they're not, you know, the HCPC aren't as things that there are also codes of conduct that are there, but you're never going to be audited by Billim. So it's those behaviors, isn't it? You know, and what we don't know, like you've said, even really experiencing physios joining you, what we don't know is how they've behaved in other workplaces. So you expecting them to turn up to your workplace going, well, you've been doing this 20 years. You must be good at all this. You must know what goes on. No, we can't just assume things. We've got to make sure that, like you've said, explicitly explain the expectations or the rules. And then I guess there is a part of saying, well, how do we then pull people up if they aren't matching those?
And that's a nice kind of segue, because I think for me, you got to separate the impact from the intent. So actually being clear and factual so you have to set up the right environment firstly. A slanging match in your reception area with a colleague, it's probably not the best idea, although ironically they're where a lot of these conversations tend to start. Or even with a client who's unhappy, you kind of think, how do you manage this situation? They've got a legitimate view, but let's take them into a quiet corner and with the intention of finding out what's really going on. So I think, in answer to your question, kind of having set up the environment in which to have that kind of conversation, we then need to share the impact of and the consequence of that, what you've seen, and where your evidence is, and inquire really about their intent. So did they understand that if they didn't do X and Y, that 1, 2, and 3 would happen? So in other words, we do a great piece of work with a client, but we don't fill the records in, which means we can't get paid. Do they understand that? And listen and understand their feelings, their reflection, and how it impacts upon your intention. Because very often then you might think we've got a precondition about what Fred, if we go back to that original scenario, so Fred's a good clinician, but he's lazy at admin, which causes a consequence. Well, maybe Fred's dyslexic. Maybe he's troubled, lots of stuff going on in his life that just means he's, I just keep forgetting Andy. So then you kind of think, okay, then need to do is make Fred aware of the consequence of his failure to follow a process or to behave in a particular way, to get to a mutual understanding about what's really important and how you then move forward to the next action, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it certainly does. And I think there's an awful lot to think about, isn't there? I think there's an awful lot for people to be exploring. And I know, we've talked about this topic a lot, and we also know this is just the tip of the iceberg of, if you are a leader, of how you can go about with this. And I think it's a lovely way to start the thought process. I think it's a great opening discussion to be doing it. As an always, look, if you're a regular listener to this podcast, then you'll know that me and Phil's kind of see our role is to be shining lights on areas that we've either been involved in conversations with some of our clients, so we can share that with you guys of how you can, either avoid some situations, hopefully, or if you're in it, give you some indicators of where you can start. If you're new to the podcast, then, this is kind of what we're about. So, feel free to listen to our backlog. We've got quite a considerable backlog now, 15, 20 minutes max. And as always, we'd love to hear from, more things that we, so have you got is there anything, Phil, for you that, if you were to summarize how you would, if either, I guess, maybe to avoid conflicts, and then how to manage it if once?
Yeah, I think so. So one of the things that struck me while I was listening to you there, which I'll just kind of skim over the top of, but I think in deciding that you need to take action, I think about the knowledge base. What knowledge do you expect an individual to have? And you need to test out whether or not they actually do have that knowledge. Along with knowledge, we need skill. So how are we deploying, or how are they deploying the skills? How are we deploying our skills as a leader? And how is that relating to the knowledge that we have? And where is the mutual understanding there? On top of that, then you have to apply judgment. So somebody has to make a decision. And often, well, it's a truism in life. We're all making judgments every second of the day, because it's how we stay alive, basically, isn't it? We have to make decisions that some of them, don't step off this curb because you'll get run over by the bus, kind of thing. Yeah. How do you make that judgment? Well, I don't know. It's kind of it's just within. It's a subconscious behavior. a learned routine. But then you move into kind of attitude, and the attitudinal piece then often is determined by the treatment and the relationship that we have with Fred, or Fred has with us in our little scenario. So being aware of all of that from a leadership and management point of view, and being proportionate with our action. So just because we hear a snippet from Adam, the other clinician, that says Fred's a lazy bugger and he doesn't fill in his sheets, the thing we better do is we better go and check out that that's true to start with. Otherwise, we run the risk of causing a conflict in yet another area. And is this a pattern or is this a one-off? If it's a one-off, it's a very quiet, low-key conversation just to say, have you realized that you're behind with this at the moment? Anything you need to help? If it becomes a pattern, then actually we need to be thinking about a more structured conversation. Ultimately, all of these have the potential to run to some kind of performance and disciplinary conversation, which ultimately could mean parting company with that individual. All of which can be done really effectively and sensitively. So, in the past, I've, had directly and indirectly had to fire quite a few people, but actually you can enable them to leave the organization with dignity, and also people in the organization thinking, well, Fred deserved it really. And I think he was fairly treated. So actually Phil's okay. Andy's okay as a leader. It's quite a nice place to work for. You feel supported. Whereas if you're a finger waggy boss from the start and you're permanently a finger waggy boss, then everybody keeps their head down, knowing that they're not going to have that courageous conversation with you as the leader because they know you're going to bite the head off.
Yeah.
And that impacts productivity, performance, creativity, innovation within your business, and it'll cascade into the relationships you got with clients.
And ultimately,
that's the magnitude really of mishandling human behavior in the workplace.
No, I think that's a really massive point, and I think it's something that the things I took away from just listening to you is one, if that happens in the workplace and people are getting more and more like that, then it is going to be recognized by the clients and the customers themselves. And also for you as a leader, it becomes a really unhappy place for you to go into work and try and lead a team.
Absolutely.
And that makes it worse, doesn't it, as well? Because, not only have you got unhappy customers, unhappy staff, but you generally as a leader in a bad place. So now I think it's a really important conversation we've had today. And I really hope that you all listening have taken something really positive from it. And if you are anything, then, take some action. And again, if you need some help and support, then always feel free to reach out to us on all of our social media channels. Yeah, I got that right. I remember them. Or feel free to email us at info@elevateyourclinic.com.
Excellent. Until next time, Andy.
Thanks very much, Phil. Lovely points. And I'll see you very soon.
Yeah, take care.
Bye.